Final Fantasy VII Remake is the first part of this legendary franchise that is getting a new style. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most popular Final Fantasy games with layered characters, a dramatic story with twists and turns, and evolving gameplay. You would think remaking the game with better graphics and overhauled modernized gameplay mechanics would be a brilliant idea. Unfortunately, this new take of a popular game comes off undeniably bland. Cloud is a merc with an attitude who gets strung alongside of a resistance team bent on taking down an unapologetic, grimy corporation known as Shinra. Cloud is an ex-soldier of Shinra, so this resistance team needs his help taking them down from within. With an old friend working with the resistance, Cloud can't say no, and he gets dragged along with their conquest. Things don't go as planned as they soon find out that there are bigger entities and plans at large that are ultimately out of their control, and they have to find ways to deal with it while not looking like the bad guys in the public eye. By being the first part of a long game, this game already doesn't have much to work with. There's only so much that could be done story and gameplay wise. That's where the changes to this remake come into play. The story seems to be the same, but with a top-of-the-line animation to go along with it instead of blocky characters doing some motions and standing in the same poses constantly. That is until shortly into the game, and there on out, there are some changes. Not only does this new story expand on the character and universe some more, it seems like it is going into a much more expansive direction to the point some may call this remake a sequel. For the story and game in general having nothing to do but to be short, these changes are welcoming and exciting for fans and newcomers alike. With all that said, story beats still hit on the slower side, which in turn affect the gameplay parts because sometimes nothing is actually happening. That's actually a good way to describe my experience. There's a lot of nothing that happens, which kind of has to happen to stretch out this part of a game to make the experience fuller. The story changes so you can go do or see something that wasn't in the original game, to fill out some mind-numbing do this 3 times quests that will result in nothing substantial. For example, there's one part of the game where you and your party are inside of this plate that hangs over above Sector 4. In this section of the game, you are basically running back and forth turning off these big energy spires, but it's riddled with long drawn out conversations, unskippable slow walking, and pointless cutscenes. And there's a bunch of fighting the same monsters scattered in between. A lot of the game feels like this, and it's so unfun that it makes me feel like it's there to just pad it out a little bit more to add some unnecessary hours to your game time, so by the end of it all, you think it was worthwhile and not just time consuming for no reason.
No can do, Cloud. This is our plan, and you'll learn to love it. So, here's how I think we should approach him.
Graphically, the game holds up after all the patches, and runs great. It is super cool to see all these places reimagined, and I find environments, in Final Fantasy games in particular, incredibly pleasing to be in. From serene night and back streets of a sleepy neighborhood, to large hard brash metal structures clunking under your feet, Final Fantasy games have a way to totally engulf your mind and senses through their environment and sound design. All of the voice work is fantastic, as well with some of Cloud's lines being some of the standout moments in the game. Sometimes the script can be a bit sluggish and drag on with unnecessary banter or cheesy dialogue. The gameplay feels fun if not a bit on the easy side, and powering up your materia can get addicting. You can switch between party members and each one can provide a small advantage in a certain area that another member cannot. But with weapons, accessories, materia, abilities, and summons being so flexible, there really isn't anything that is demanding any serious form of strategy. Also, since the entire cast of characters is not here, it's hard to make anything as engaging as it should be. In contrast to something like after getting all of the party members in Final Fantasy XIII and being able to switch to buff, debuff, stagger, attack, etc., having only a few party members the entire game doesn't make the battles tactical at all. The way to accommodate this is that they have one character able to stagger faster than another and one character able to hit flying enemies better. It all feels moot in the end. Because of this and the ease of battle, the gameplay can get boring aside from a few battles where the enemies hit hard just to hit hard. When you are not running around fighting, you are running around doing quests for other people. These quests range from finding children or fighting off some monsters. This is an area of the game that could have been the best part of the game, but it is largely lacking. With new graphics and cool environments, there could have been some crazy, wild, or actually interesting quests. There's only a set of quests that involve the comedic character Johnny that actually has some substance, but is very surface level stuff. Other than that, there's some chests that can be found and maybe a couple environmental puzzles that need to be solved while you're running around, and that's it. Basic combat and boring side quests make actually playing this game feel repetitive and monotonous. There is never an urge to keep playing.
My, is that Cloud?
Completing the game unlocks a chapter select in a hard mode. There are some extra fights and notes you can pick up when you replay the game. You can also make a few different decisions during certain dialogue options that give you multiple choices, with some of these affecting what a couple characters wear. But with the game not even getting mildly interesting until past the halfway point, the desire to replay the game for these extras is unsurprisingly low. Final Fantasy VII's legacy was already stretched thin with the multiple games that tried to expand its universe. The remake just continues to eschew this legacy, with it being flat out a chore to get through. While the story may possibly bring some interesting takes to the overarching lore, the uncompelling gameplay, easy combat, and slow-paced nature of the game isn't doing it any favors, especially with this one only being part of an entire game. Other than what the game is trying to tell you underneath the main story, Final Fantasy VII Remake is an uneventful, and passionless shell of its former self. I give Final Fantasy VII Remake a 6 out of 10.